that you?
Hey, you.
And you, and you, and you, and you, and everybody else. Welcome to the Cheshire
Reading
Cast.
Rainbow.
Yeah, welcome to Read. They don't know what that is.
I know what Reading Rainbow is. Yeah.
Oh, you do? All right.
We had TVs that rolled out into the classroom with a VHS player.
Wait, was Reading
We had
Rainbow?
them eventually.
I'm your host, Corey.
And I'm your host, Patricia.
Yeah, and that's Michael, and that's Sooriya down there. I don't know where they're going to be on everybody else's screen, but Reading Rainbow. Is that the one with the mirror, the magic mirror? And she would say, I see dawn.
Yeah, that was Magic Garden.
Okay, that's what I thought you were talking about. That's before their time, right?
And that was awesome, too.
Yes. They never said Corey, though.
I don't know. You watched every episode?
I watched every episode specifically to hear my name.
Because it's all about you.
I mean, duh.
Yeah. Tonight on our show, and first of all, welcome back, Corey. We've been on a little bit of a summer hiatus, so this is our first show in a bit. So if we're rusty, forgive us. But tonight we have on Cheshire Coalition for Change, because we're coming back from a summer hiatus, so why not go big, right?
Go big or go home.
That's right. Their mission statement: to push for equitable policy and curriculum changes within Cheshire public schools while raising awareness on injustices against marginalized populations within our community and beyond. So let me introduce to you the two voices we have on tonight. Although the coalition's bigger, these are the two voices for this evening. We have on, which I think you already introduced, but Sooriya Sundaram. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, you did.
And Michael Chambrelli.
Yes, there you go.
So they are Cheshire High School graduates.
Big round of applause for Patricia, by the way, for pronouncing both your names without
I
one
even
mistake.
pronounce mine right most of the time.
It's amazing.
So we have Cheshire alumni with us. Michael, you are 2011.
Right.
Sooriya, you are 2013. And you're here today to not only tell us about this coalition, because it's huge, but you're also here to show us how we can become part of your conversation.
Yes.
Okay.
And what a timely conversation it is.
Let's give a little pretext right now for something that our town, Cheshire, I know people listen from all over, but Cheshire's dealing with a micro activity of some pretty poignant negative words written on an elementary school building.
Yes.
Corey, do you want to explain more?
No, because I don't want to say the word that was written. It just starts with an N and ends with an R.
Right.
And
it was written in chalk.
Which makes it easier to clean up.
Unfortunately,
but it
you
doesn't
can
make the
take it up.
word less.
You can clean it off the building quickly, but you cannot clean it out of our universal experience. It happens. So at this point, there's no more moving forward without cracking open this impossible conversation, because everybody wants to be an ally, but very few people know how. And that's where we are today. Go ahead.
I was just saying that's where we're trying to come in, and I'm going to kick it to Sooriya to introduce herself as ladies first, and then I will jump in.
Yeah,
and we can get started the conversation.
So my name is Sooriya, as everyone knows, and I graduated from CHS in 2013. I was born in New Haven and have lived in Cheshire since I was 3. So I went to Darcy, Doolittle, Dodd, CHS, UConn. So I would consider myself kind of, I'm your classic Cheshire kid.
You're a product of Cheshire.
I am. And I'm currently in law school right now at Northeastern University. And I'm hoping to do some public interest work. But basically, in the wake of George Floyd's murder, I started thinking to myself, where is the place that we can make the highest impact? And I thought back to Cheshire, because Cheshire is this primarily white town that, I love. I grew up there, but, everyone, since it's such a small knit town, I thought, people know who I am. So maybe let's try to work with some teachers. Like, let's try and work with Jeff Solon, who's the superintendent, to just, try and enact some racially literate curriculum reform, because there's so many products of Cheshire going out into the world who don't realize that racism even exists. There's no concept of privilege until they get to college, honestly. So,
and that depends on where they go to college as well.
Yeah, and that does depend on where they go to
that
college.
Can continue.
Even what you major in. So,
and where you're employed after, absolutely.
Definitely. And so, like, that's kind of what got me thinking. I was like, something needs to be done. No one's doing it. So let me kind of step in and form a group. And so I found a group of other kids who had a very similar mindset, who wanted to write a letter to the BOE. So
you guys are no longer kids. You're not kids.
No, you're not.
That's true.
Thank
we
you.
are adults. Yeah.
I'm glad you jumped in, because I was gonna.
Yeah, I just
not that being involved as a kid is impossible or any less important. But you guys are not kids. You guys are alumni of this town, but you are not children. You're furthering your education. You're both, I believe, following degrees in law. And if this is where your, loyalties lie, you have empowered everybody, especially Cheshire.
Yep, definitely. So that's kind of how we came together, and that's kind of how this got started. It was just a bunch of prior students who thought that something needed to be done in Cheshire. And so we got together and started making something happen. So that's my very long introduction. So,
well, how about you, Mike?
I'll keep mine shorter. Hello. So I kind of came a little bit late to the party. I'd seen Sooriya and the group kind of put out their letter to the Board of Ed. And like Sooriya, I grew up in Cheshire, went through Darcy on up to the high school.
You were in South. You were Norton, right?
Yes, I was Norton, and my mom was actually the lunch lady at Norton and then Doolittle for about 15 years. So she may have served a lot of people listening, either their kids' lunch or them lunch.
Is she still there or no?
No, not anymore.
When did she leave?
About 5 years ago, maybe.
Oh, so she had at least two of my kids.
Yeah.
So I have a daughter in college now. So I went through Darcy to Cheshire High School, and I went to Central Connecticut State University for a year before I transferred to Fordham up in the Bronx.
Did you go to the Jolly Tinker?
Yes, I did go to the Jolly Tinker.
Or do they still call it the Jolly Stinker?
No, we just called it Tink.
Tinks. I went to Bronx Science, right? There. Do you know the high school over on Bedford, Bronx Science?
Yeah. Yep.
That's my alma mater.
That teach there now.
I went to the Bronx Zoo once.
It's a great school.
Free on Wednesdays.
The Bronx Zoo is a great school? Sure.
Why not? You go to Arthur Avenue? Oh my God,
lived on Arthur Avenue.
That's the best food.
Yeah, it was my Italian heritage. I was living it up.
Did your parents make you bring stuff back?
Oh, all the time.
All the time. We still go.
Food.
Yeah, we still go.
I know plenty of people that go down just for the trip. But so after Fordham, I started teaching in New York City public schools. I got my master's from Fordham in teaching, and then eventually, started law school, which I am in law school now. So, Corey, we surprised you. We sent 2 lawyers on the show.
That's
good. Give you a heads up.
I need all the attorneys I can get.
We need a safe word for Corey.
Are you still a teacher?
No, I work for New York City Public Schools as an investigator. So we investigate misconduct within the school system.
Oh, really?
So you're like IEB for the teachers.
I don't know that acronym.
It's a cop investigative bureau. It's all right. Internal investigations. I don't know.
So clarify that a little bit. Let me see if I have a good idea of what I think it is. So if I don't know, maybe if somebody writes something on a wall in chalk or spray paint, you might be involved in investigating that, or are you talking more a case where somebody says so-and-so did something inappropriate?
So-and-so did something inappropriate.
Okay.
I bet your job's becoming easier with cell phones.
Yeah, and you wouldn't believe what people
Oh, I was a teacher.
I mean, I know you believe. Yeah.
I taught. I was an elementary school teacher in the Bronx.
Okay, so you know the New York City public schools.
I do. I'm also a product of them, so I have nothing disparaging to say. Yeah. I got an amazing education.
And for me, that was my, and kind of bring it back to the group here. One of the things that Sooriya and the rest of us in the group noticed is when we got to college, a lot of us, even if you went to UConn, a lot of our members went to UConn. A lot of them went to city schools, outside of Connecticut, liberal arts colleges. It wasn't there until there that we got this idea of like, it wasn't called anti-racism. It might not have even been as far as anti-racism, but it wasn't there until there that we really got the skills to engage with other cultures at a professional level. The Cheshire education, though it's such a great education and everyone in town, kind of plays it up, we noticed the deficiency kind of right away. And especially becoming a teacher in New York City public schools, what I was teaching my kids to embrace other people's cultures, Dominicans hanging out with Puerto Ricans, hanging out with Jamaicans, hanging out with Italians. There's this like vibrant multiculturalism, and our social emotional awareness was had a racial critique to it. So it was kind of always on the forefront of teaching for me. And then reflecting upon my experience at Cheshire Public Schools, that just wasn't there. And I felt as though I was playing catch up to a lot of students that went to school elsewhere and had that, even within Connecticut, they had that background. And we still, something Sooriya and I wanted to point out today was Cheshire is behind, even in this moment, compared to what other schools in Connecticut are doing in terms of like an anti-racist curriculum or embracing, a racial lens to how they deliver their subjects, whether over Zoom or in person.
Let me ask you guys a question, being that you both went through the Cheshire school systems at the same time. Essentially the same time. Yeah, 2 years.
Ish.
Have you two spoke of your individual experiences going through the schools and how it was? Because, I mean, let's be honest. You're both a very different culture background. And I'm curious as to how that affected or how you experienced that, or what your experiences were with that growing up here in town and going through our schools.
That's a bit of a loaded question because they also have a gender difference as well.
But I mean, first I'd like to acknowledge that, this coalition is not Black-led. And I just want to acknowledge that there are certain voices that aren't on this call right now. And
they're missing, and they need to be part of the conversation.
And the reason why, we've kind of taken this work upon ourselves is that the onus should not be on Black students to do this work. It is on ourselves to educate each other and our own selves. But that being said, like, I did use my personal experience as a fuel to kind of help uplift other marginalized voices in the Cheshire school system. Obviously, when I was in the Cheshire school system, in a lot of ways, people expected me to represent the diversity of Cheshire. And,
it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a large burden to bear as a student who's, just trying to get into college or whatever. But I think that a huge problem is that a lot of the times, when we're in school and we're experiencing these microaggressions on a daily basis, as a kid, we don't really understand what those microaggressions really mean. We don't really know that, we know something feels off, but we don't want to call it.
Feel it.
Yeah, but we don't want to call it racism. We don't want to shed more light on these differences that we feel. But throughout school, in Cheshire, I felt different, and it was difficult to escape that because I think that, at the time we didn't have language to discuss what a microaggression was. I didn't know what white privilege was, and I didn't know that there were certain things that I was benefiting from that Black people couldn't. I didn't realize that there were certain things that white people were benefiting from that Black students couldn't, or that even I couldn't benefit from. So I only learned these things when I went to college, and I learned really quickly because I was a sociology major. And so I kind of went into the thick of it. And, really our whole idea is that we have to start teaching these kids earlier that these words exist, that these kinds of prejudices are very real. And even students and kids harbor these kinds of prejudices and they don't even realize it. So we want to try and change the curriculum to reflect a more inclusive, culture in Cheshire. We want to basically change the culture of Cheshire to be more inclusive and inviting to non-white individuals, because speaking as someone who's gone through that system, I definitely didn't feel like I belonged a lot of the time.
Are you talking about unconscious bias?
Yes, unconscious bias, but then also a conscious bias that people didn't really think was a big deal. So like making certain jokes or saying that, you don't see color, like those aren't unconscious biases, really. Those are like pretty conscious biases, I think.
For a while, not seeing color was the way to... I have a very different background, so I'm trying to process and understand, as our listeners all are, because we all come from someplace.
It's not only you have a different background. Hold on. We're also 25, 20, 22, 3 years older than these kids.
Still going on when I grew up. This is.
But I know. But go ahead. Continue.
What was I going to say?
You don't see color.
You're talking about the color blindness.
Thank you. So for a while, like everybody wants I don't mean to use the word everybody. People that want to be an ally, right? We were taught early, you don't see color. I wasn't taught early, but you hear that from a lot of people whose intentions are very good. But like you said, the curriculum, the way that they're being taught is not necessarily being taught by people who get it, who have been taught in the way to really grow their children in a socio-emotional way that's inclusive. That it's okay to see color. You don't have to be afraid to point out somebody else from a different culture, or they have an accent. That's not something to look down on. That's something to appreciate. That means they speak 2 languages. Like, yeah. That's amazing. I can't do that. So when I hear an accent, I'm in awe of the ability of somebody to speak multiple languages. And then in that vein, I've passed that on to my kids. But I was not brought up in Cheshire. So here I am learning. My kids are being brought up in Cheshire. So here I am imparting on them the urban life existence and life experiences that I went through. But I just asked my high schooler today, I'm like, what does this mean to you? Because we take for granted, and I don't know how to do it. So programs like what you guys are doing is outstanding in creating allies, in creating people to see the unseen, to see the things that we say, that we do, the way that we think that is inherently biased. And every human has it. It's not just one race. It's not just one gender. And it's what pops into your head the second you see something. It's the way we process visual information. And like we can create that. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but the 2 points I wanted to make was one, that like color blindness kind of whitewashes the issue. And what I mean by that is it takes away, like you said, it may have good intentions, but it's not coming from the experience of the person that is being oppressed, or is the adverse action is against them. It's still the oppressor in this scenario, the one that has the power, that has the privilege, deciding the terms of how we're going to perceive color, in that we're not going to see it at all. So it just invalidates the experience of Black students, or you can even extend that same scenario to gender non-fluid students, trans students, queer students, whatever. Plug in whatever marginalized group you want, you're going to have that same effect. So I think, long-winded, but that highlights the systemic racism within Cheshire's culture that it is unconscious, but it's just perpetuated. And
a majority of it is unconscious. A majority.
Yeah, that is just perpetuated through the system, and you know, causes detrimental effects to those students. Honestly, I forgot my second point.
I mean,
how do you change a
forever?
Go ahead, Sooriya.
Oh, so I was just going to say that, yes, I do agree that, you know, saying things like, I don't see color, that is an unconscious bias. But then when people are given the feedback to not say it, and then people continue to say it, you know, that is not unconscious to me. That to me feels like a deliberate attempt to kind of undermine someone else's wishes about how they wish to be perceived, which that I think needs to change, because there have been several people in the Cheshire school system who've been given this exact feedback who will be defensive and who will say, no, this is how I mean it. Well, it doesn't really matter how you mean it. It matters how it's being perceived.
Right. Well,
intention has nothing to do with someone taking the impact of your words.
You're learning this when you learn these things when you're raising, you know, kids and you're in marriages and you know, you get this feedback from your children like, well, Dad, when you say that, it gives me a reaction. And it's the reaction that I get that you need to pay attention to, not the reaction you get. And that's what people are missing is you're what you're saying, what you're thinking is having an effect on me.
So it doesn't matter your intention.
Everybody sees the world through their eyes.
Right. And we need to
a large problem going forward. We've made so much progress, right? I mean, we've made so much progress, kind of stalled, but I see a pedal on the gas now. I do. But what I'm seeing is defense. I'm seeing that people are, when you say white privilege, let's just bare tax it here. When you say white privilege, 50%, I want to say, of the people who hear it are mad that you are now being racist towards them. So there's this lack of understanding with the verbiage that's
reverse racism.
There's a lack of understanding.
I know.
There's a lack of understanding in the verbiage that's being used as we evolve, right? This is change. This is a cultural consciousness of change. This is a reflection. This is a coming to terms with evils that have been perpetuated through, whether it be through societal norms, whether it be through directly passing it down from grandparents to parent to grandchild. However we are perpetuating this unconscious, sometimes conscious bias, it is being met with defense. You're hurting people's feelings. And then the victimizers then become the victims. And it's really hard to get to a place of discourse when people are offended. And here we sit on this scale of societal change.
I'm pointing at you. Hopefully I'm pointing at you on everybody's screen. But didn't that just happen in town too? Or is that a whole nother show?
That's a gender bias. Show? It makes me sad. I'm really saddened. And all that does is show that, you know, Cheshire is a great community, just like everybody who's listening. Yes. Your communities are amazing communities, and they're filled with amazing people. Like birth, there's pain before change. There's pain growing, and that's where we are. We are at the crux of this place where it's not going to be easy. Change is hard, and everybody, we need allies. You need allies. I need allies.
Change is really difficult. And what I'm curious about, guys, is, I mean, first you have this issue in the school, you know, systemic racism, and you know how you teach kids,
specifically not anti-racist. I don't know if they're teaching, like, I want to stay away from the school being racist and more to the point where the school could start to lean towards more of an anti-racism stance.
Sure. But then you have, and I agree with, yes, Trisha, you're right. But then you have the community at large. So in which direction do you want to try to enact this change / education? I mean, Is it at the school so it goes home, or is it in the home so it goes to school? Go ahead.
So you know, I had this gripe with the Cheshire school system that was like, you know, these students they are getting a good education in Cheshire, but then they're going home to their families, and their families are, you know, politicizing certain things that are going on in school. As a student, I am very aware of how neutral teachers try to be. So I think that on some level, neutrality on these kinds of issues by teachers is it's complicit in racism, which it's by not speaking out against it, you're not doing anything to help. And so you're actually giving more power to people who benefit from racism. So,
so they're legally held to neutrality, though. Are you looking at a subset of new standards that would protect teachers to speak out on one side of the issue or the other?
I mean, go ahead, Mike, please.
I was going to say, what do you mean by they have a legal obligation to be neutral?
So if you, as a teacher, you are a teacher in the public schools, if you bring to class a political bias, let's say you want to put up a banner, or if you bring to class certain theories or a hard push on a certain part of the curriculum that extends what's expected of you, parents, you can get in trouble. You can get the school system in trouble for voicing beliefs, right? Teachers are supposed to be neutral.
I think you'd have to brush up on that because,
well,
you know, a school isn't going to stop your freedom of speech even in the classroom. If you're politically organizing, different story. But
so let me give you a real world scenario, Mike. Okay,
real world scenario.
This happened to me at Norton. Okay, in 2008. One of my kids was in school. It was Obama, McCain. Okay. My kid came home with an educational coloring book about Barack Obama. I'm fine with that, but I simply posed the question, where's the John McCain one? And my son said, was it my son or my daughter? Whichever one. Said, well, we only got this one. So I went to the school and I said,
not okay.
Where's the McCain one? Why are we sending home just no? Well, it was they said, well, it's, you know, first black. I said, I don't.
But that's historic. Like that was historic that it was the first black president. So
that's your take on it.
That's your take on it.
I agree with you, and I get it.
How's that my take on it? It literally was historic that it was the first black president.
Right, but he was running for president, so there was a political bias being sent home with students.
Second real world experience. There used to only be Christmas celebrated in public schools. You used to celebrate religious holidays. And if a teacher was not celebrating Christmas growing up in the Bronx, Hanukkah wasn't until way later. There are things that teachers are allowed to bring into the classroom and not. And whether it's systemic, which I guarantee you that it is, or if it's personal bias, there are realms under which teachers have to perform their duties. So putting the onus on individual teachers, I don't think is, personally speaking, I don't think that's where it should go. I think you guys going after a curriculum change is definitely the right place to focus your efforts.
And that's our point. And, you know, two things I want to hit on, and I'll hopefully remember my second point this time. One was, you know, you talk about the defensiveness that we may experience. And so far, we've experienced that on different levels. Like Sooriya pointed out, a teacher that we kind of went after for her opinion on color blindness got defensive and continued to use the word. But we've encountered the same defensive tactics, even from Solon and some of the members of the planning team, I'll call them, for the Cheshire Public Schools. And one of those ways is...
Are you talking... is that the planning committee that with Jen and
I might be using wrong terms then. It was like Kevin Hanlon. We spoke with.
Okay, must be a different committee.
On other names, yeah.
So for people's references, it's Dr. Solon. He is the superintendent of Cheshire Public Schools. Okay, go ahead.
So
sorry, Mike.
Speaking to Dr. Solon, we've been kind of emailing him back and forth. We've had a few meetings with him.
He's an ally. He's a true ally. I know he is. Have you watched our interviews with him?
I have, and I've read a lot of the things that he said, and I know that he got his PhD in like social justice work, but what has been coming out of our emails with him or even the meetings has been a lot of kind of virtue signaling to politics and not so much substance. So one of the things that we keep hearing about was that the Cheshire community cares, and I have it somewhere that I can find later. The Cheshire community cares, and we're doing all this work to combat racism in the classroom. But then no action items are laid out, and we've seen nothing go out to the teachers. We've seen no discussion. There's no professional development around the issue. We've gotten COVID as an excuse, which I understand the challenges of planning around COVID.
Yeah, we start next week. It's insane.
But they're intimately intertwined, systemic racism and oppression and COVID. And that's at a class level, not even so much a race level. And what we're trying to do is bring up the bottom in order to affect everyone, to give everyone a better education in the Cheshire Public School system, especially in a town that prides itself on its education. So one of the things that we're really trying to do, and another reason that we're here on the podcast, other than gaining a larger audience and hopefully tapping into the parents, is pushing Solon to the fact that we're looking for tangible responses. We want to see action items, not just you telling us that you have plans or you're working.
Have you given ideas? What are some of your ideas?
So we've actually given, a long laundry list of action items that were sourced by the community. So for example, we'd like to implement at least one professional development day that is focusing on race-based issues. We would really like if teachers would also take some time to read some anti-racist works, some books, and we've compiled a list of
one. White fragility. What's your go-to? A good one. Name a good one so we have it on here. What do you want? Give us one.
Give me 2 seconds. Continue talking.
How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, for example, is a really good one. White Bound by Matthew Huey.
End of Policing.
Yes.
Alex Vitale.
Just Mercy. There's a lot of really good books out there.
This is good information to put out there because people will write down these titles and it's a place to start. So you said a professional development day where maybe somebody comes in from UConn, Yale, and speaks to the teachers on how to actively be anti-racist or how to notice subconscious bias in children. A plethora, a billion different topics they could discuss. It probably could be done in 2 weeks of professional development. You're saying give one day to this concept, just one little seed of change.
We have a bunch of teachers that are part of this group, just, highly educated people that have experienced how to be an anti-racist in a multitude of different professions.
Are there any online seminars going on right now that somebody could look into on their own time? Do you know of?
That's something that, we do have an Instagram page where we have been reposting things, and we're kind of growing our public image in that way. So
do you know of any external
not
sources?
Off the top of my head, but if
how to be an ally,
if that's something people would be interested in, that's kind of what we're here to see, is hear from the community, is what would be helpful to them, because we've done the work ourselves and we know that it's a lot of work and it could be overwhelming, and we want to kind of alleviate some of that burden for the community with giving out resources, helping with professional development. When
did your group start, Mike?
Sooriya, you can answer that one.
Our group started, we came together in early June, so like very recently after George Floyd's murder.
June 2020.
Yes.
2020.
So, yeah. So we are. Your organization is less than 90 days old.
Listen, these millennials, they want action quick, Corey. They don't want to wait around.
Yeah.
They demand change.
I think some of the things that you're suggesting Solon look into are truly beneficial and important. But I also think that I mean, if your conversations with him have started in June or even July, I mean, I think you got to give him a little leeway.
But so the issue with that is, you know, we have a laundry list that we've sent to him of different schools that have taken just even the tiniest bit of action. And that, you know, Sooriya, correct me if I'm wrong, it's either Manchester or Mansfield.
Both.
Both. But one of them specifically sent a list of like 3 books to the teachers, and How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi, if I pronounce it correctly, was one of them. And there's a couple other options. And they were just supposed to read one book over the summer to have an entry point into an anti-racist, you know, curriculum or philosophy could be. And we've kind of asked for even as simple as that. We've suggested that in an email, and then give them a PD or a, you know, we could even create discussion questions for them to discuss amongst themselves. We're not asking
and we know he has not done that. We know he's not done that.
I think the last thing we got from him was he was going to forward our list to teachers, but it's been very kind of like brush us away.
Do you have anybody on your coalition that is an active Cheshire educator right now?
Mm-hmm.
Not a Cheshire educator, but we do have educators on our squad.
And
so are you working directly with anybody but Solon? Is there anybody else who you're actively engaging with ideas of change? And
anybody on the board of ed that's part of your coalition?
You know, in order to get people to join our coalition, they have to respond to our emails and they have to kind of engage with us. And I think that there's been a lot of pushback because of this, you know, defensiveness that we talked about, or it's, you know, a lack of time, a lack of prioritization of these issues.
Well, you know, this is a long haul conversation, right? And
definitely.
Very long haul. I mean, listen, I'll tell you guys, I have a very good relationship with Dr. Solon and the Board of Ed. And every time I've had a concern or a question from either, I've made very pointed calls or emails and have gotten near immediate results. So I wonder...
Corey, look at who you are.
He's flexing. Corey's flexing.
Yeah, I'm curious why you think you've gotten that attention, Corey.
Because I'm consistent, and I'm wondering. Well, I mean, what is it? Is it something else? Is it something I'm?
I have a list of emails.
Yeah, we consistently reach out to him, and he's been working with us in his very limited capacity, but we're frankly disappointed with the
but since July, guys, it's like what you're asking for is not a 90-day fix.
In fact, it should be a very short fix because we're actually compiling all of this work and giving it to him. So it should be even less work. So I don't really understand. I'm not really sure what excuses could be made because it's not a lack of time because we're putting the time in. I'm a full-time student. I can't believe everybody on the Board of Ed and Solon would be ignoring or not taking this seriously. I mean,
the Board of Ed.
Go ahead, Mike.
Have we gotten like one response from the Board of Ed? Maybe Solon gave us lip service in a Board of Ed meeting. We haven't really gotten any responses.
If you're getting lip service and no response from our Board of Ed, then I'm enraged as a parent. I because it's a serious issue. But I would love to see the conversations that are going back and forth, because I can't believe there is dismissal.
We're not here to justify anybody's
you're not.
On either
you're right,
side.
but
we're not here to enforce who should speak to who. We're here to put a light on your voice. That's what we're here. We're highlighting your voice.
We wouldn't be here otherwise. If we actually had an easy time reaching the BOE, we wouldn't even be on this podcast. You know what I mean?
Yes, you would. Of course, we would have you on this podcast.
It wouldn't have been our idea. Yeah, it would be for different reasons.
I'm going to demand that all of my friends on the Board of Ed and Dr. Solon give you a response and take action on the things that you do.
From Dr. Solon.
But I want them to take action now, because what they are bringing forward is important.
Meeting? Have you gone to a Board of Ed meeting?
Multiple times. We've asked multiple times.
They're open to the public, guys.
They're open to the public. They have open Zoom. They're all on Zoom. I actually watched one, which I wish I didn't, because there's some gender stuff going on, which is kind of it gets my blood boiling. But so obviously the show is not here to take sides on who should be talking to who, or to
I'm on both sides.
Timeline. I don't want to transfix your timeline either.
If you guys want an ally in town to speak your voice, I'll do it, because I think what you're after is important.
Oh, Corey.
I think it's very important.
He won't let me finish a sentence.
Hold them off.
Go ahead.
Corey, let me speak.
Go ahead, Trish.
I'm trying.
Speak.
Oh, so we're not here.
Go ahead.
We're obviously not here.
Go ahead, Trish.
Your face.
Talk.
Shut your face. So we're not here to take sides, obviously. And I'm not here to mitigate your timeline or to mitigate your purpose or the passion behind your objective, right? That's not my role. As objective as I can be observer, 2 months. You got 2 months. Everybody's heard from you on the Board of Ed. Dr. Solon's corresponded with you. Like these things, this type of change, this type of awareness, it takes time. Now, I don't want to douse you with water by any means. Go with all jets fueled. Don't get me wrong. But have you guys ever heard, and I hate to speak in cliches, but hey, I'm 45. It happens. You catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, right? Like, I don't want you to kiss anyone's butt, but the way we say things and the way we come across to people, especially when we are bringing up something that is a huge societal crevice, bleeding open sore wound right now in national discourse and being fed politically to thrive on. When you are poking that bear, which you are undoubtedly, and you're trying to, it's a bear that needs to be poked. It's a bear that's been sleeping for too long. 2 months, in the grand scheme of things, you guys have gotten a lot accomplished in 2 months, and you're mad. I'm sensing like anger towards the powers that be. That never helps. Do you know what I'm saying? And I don't mean to degrade anything you're doing. I'm just saying, are you picking up what I'm getting?
Yeah, and we haven't been combative. I think this has been the most combative place we've been.
I think Corey brings that
on our show. Sorry.
I mean, Dr. Solon we have a special relationship with Dr. Solon, where he was our principal before he was the superintendent. So he was the principal of Cheshire High. Absolutely. Yeah. And so he definitely appreciates what we're doing. But I would just say that, just because expressing dissatisfaction with the way things are going is not like it's not using honey to catch the flies. Like, change doesn't happen unless you expose what's going wrong. So I don't want to misconstrue our passion and our dissatisfaction for the way Cheshire Public Schools is addressing this issue. I don't want that to be confused with some sort of, taking sides kind of issue. Like, we are like, my parents still live in Cheshire. Like, my license is still from a Cheshire address,
I'm in Cheshire.
I don't, because I live in Boston, but I am a Cheshire citizen, and I'm voicing my very valid and legitimate grievance that Cheshire is not doing enough to address racial injustice. And maybe
and I think you're echoing a lot of voices. I think you're giving voice to a lot of people, specifically right this second, to a lot of people that feel the same way and don't have the outlet to do so. Mm-hmm. If you look at the forum, they just put out a letter yesterday, 2 weeks after that incident on the elementary school. And a lot of people are saying, why did it take so long? Why did it take so long?
But a coach
so here we
fired.
But you know why it took so long, honestly? And I saw it play out on the forum, there was a ton of suspicion on whether or not that was somebody doing it to get attention, or if it was somebody that did it for the intent of causing.
It doesn't matter.
Do you remember when we spoke before about intention and impact? It doesn't. They had to address the impact first.
And also,
it doesn't matter, Mike. You're right.
Even if it was a stunt to get attention, how is that any different? How is that any better? Like, if I want attention, I'm gonna do something else. I'm not gonna go write the N-word on a wall to get attention. There's plenty of ways to get attention.
What do you guys say? So you're battling, this is an uphill battle on some fronts, right? I mean, it's easy for some, it's harder for others. What do you say to the people who are addressing this aggression with, get over it? Spray it off the wall and get over it. How are you guys dealing with that?
People in the town just saying
people on the planet. Let's bring it broader.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just Cheshire.
Let's bring
it. My simple answer is no. I won't. There's actual lives at stake here on the basis of race, and just to stray away from inconveniencing someone with my I don't know, passion for human life, I should just get over it. I'm not gonna. My plain and simple answer is no. You get over it. If I'm bothering you, you get over it.
And those are the same people that are getting upset if they're called racist. So obviously words mean something to them and get upset when they're used against them. And this is the be all end all of words that has a very negative and impactful connotation. So it has no place in any part of our society to be
history. Does it have a place in history? Right. No, in that way. Okay.
Yeah.
Because in order to move forward, we have to embrace our past, right? We have to look at that word and
you have to look at it critically and how it's affected.
Yes. And
we live in a world where hypocrisy is the norm, and it's sadly
projection.
It's okay, and that's being sarcastic. Hypocrisy is okay. It's okay. Sorry.
Because it
get over it. It's fine.
Compartmentalizing and
not a big deal.
Make everything bad is done by somebody else, and it's this world that revolves around each individual person. That's really where we have to break into and out of.
And I think a bigger point is it's a inability to accept growth. So something I think Corey asked, the difference in experiences that Sooriya and I had in high school. I'll openly say I was a little asshole in high school. I was part of that culture that I think is kind of bred, especially within the white male community in Cheshire, of being of disliking the other. So whether it's homophobia, transphobia, anti-Semitism, racism, list it all.
But who taught you to not like the other? Was it your peers or was it your parents?
Or your peers?
No, that wasn't my parents. That was peers. That was purely seeing it.
So you went against what your parents taught you and embraced your friends' phobias?
Because as a high schooler, all you're trying to do is be cool. I at least from my experience, I wanted to be cool. And the cool kids were the ones that were assholes to everyone. So I participated in that culture because that was the norm. That was what you did if you wanted to fit in, was you otherized other people. So, I see my journey into anti-racism as having to reject that, lean on the values and the morals that I learned. Yeah, own what I did, who I was, completely change that and actively work against it so that other people could either start that process earlier or never have to go through the process.
Or at least identify what's going on.
Exactly.
Have some reflection.
And one of the biggest issues that I had with Solons Response is we keep twofold. One is that his responses, well, he congratulates us for all the great work that we're doing and
will continue to do.
And continue to do, and how great it is that it's, you know, we're Cheshire alumni coming back to the community to say, like, this is something we see as wrong, and here's why. And we have like an actual reason why we believe it was wrong, because we have experience going into the outside world that needs to change. But so he congratulates us in that way, but then we've been kind of treated as if we're still high school students doing like an extracurricular project rather than adults volunteering our time to better change the community that we grew up in. So that
it's hard to change that lens. It's hard to change that lens, but over time it will change, especially with the professionalism that you're bringing, at least what I see here.
Appreciate it.
Give it time.
Yeah. And it just back to the length of time that it's taken. Like, we're not asking for Cheshire to be anti-racist by the start of the school year. We're asking them to start the process, start the journey with something as simple as sending a book list out to the teachers and making a requirement to read one. I think as an educator,
that might be something you can put out in the forum, right?
Yeah,
we'll be happy to provide you a list of the, you know, a book list, any other resources.